This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Joey brings me a question about nihilism, and that's also it.
Woo! All by myself.
No, Joey, you're not.
This is Joey, and I'm feeling rather nihilistic, I suppose. I'm not really feeling nihilistic, but this is what an executive producer and conditional optimist Jess Vander sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. Fair.
Are you conditionally I feel like that is accurate. No.
I haven't taken too long to think about it, but it sounds mostly there on first blush. Maybe.
Yeah. Jess,
Joey,
and dear listeners, we're recording 2 episodes in quick succession because our incredible sound engineer, friend, bearded hunk, Alex Contel, is going on vacation.
Not gonna like that.
Muy guapo, Alex.
Oh
I don't speak enough Spanish.
We're moving on. Muy guapo.
So we're doing a quick one. There's no housekeeping.
Okay.
Jess, I recently wrote something for our progress report newsletter. Everyone should subscribe. Go to sylvain.co. You'll be able to be directed towards it, or I believe getprogress.sylvain.co. Jess, can you confirm
That's
the
definitely
URL?
not it. Nope, that isn't it.
Progress by sylvain.co. That might be it.
It is that.
Anyways, our newsletter, I recently wrote a piece about sort of rising nihilism and sort of some of the issues associated with nihilism and the pitfalls of that. And turns out someone wanted to talk to me about it, or maybe Jillian talked to them, and whatever the case is, I'm speaking to someone about it next week, and I kind of wanted to talk with you a little bit about it, both as practice, beta test the conversation, but
beta
also
testing.
I'm curious about your opinion on this, because I do think, independent of whether you are a conditional optimist or, however you might categorize your opinion, I feel like you have a complex and nuanced sort of approach to outlook on things.
I thank you.
And so this, thank you.
That's very nice of you. Thank you.
This sort of like rise in nihilism that is, I've found articles written by like young millennials or Gen Z about this idea. A lot of it is stemming from, there are a lot of social forces, let's call them, facing younger people in the United States, and some of those forces being sort of global in nature as well, that is leading to this sort of idea of like, nothing's going to change, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to do anything about it. And I think I am I don't know that I'm an optimistic person, but I am a person who is a little bit more oriented towards action, maybe, and like will turn to be like, okay, like, well, what do we do about that? Like, let's do something.
Mm-hmm.
But my fear is that this sort of pessimism or nihilism is sort of creating a situation where people are less motivated, less driven to act, because there's a belief that nothing we do will make a change in a time where there's a lot of actions, whether it's, student debt, housing, systemic racism, climate change. Like, all of these things are sort of major social issues that require us to do something to enact a change.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've been going through that discussion and learning about it and listening to different people talk about it or reading different people talk about it, there's this idea of optimism and pessimism that I'm kind of wondering how valuable those ideas are at all, right? Whether or not they do anything for us in conversation when potentially the only thing that really matters is whether we act on changes independent of whether like how we feel, like how successful or unsuccessful the outcomes will be. So my question for you, Jess, is should we be using language like optimism or pessimism, or is there a different way that we could look at these challenges that might allow for better outcomes?
You may at first think that this is a completely unrelated response, but I have to say that this whole thing immediately took me to something that definitely has become a jokingly but commonly a pattern in my personal life, and we've been talking about it quite a lot, where I might be complaining, admittedly, to Ryan about something. And I will say things like, why blank? Or like, what am I even supposed to do about ... And his immediate response is actually attempting to solve this problem by recommending something that is, thoughtful and, trying to do something about it. When, to be honest, even if I phrased it as a question that isn't necessarily the thing that I was seeking when I asked that, instead, really what I was saying was validate my problems, validate my feelings. And you know what? Yeah. The first thing that I thought of when you were talking about this nihilism is, maybe part of it stems from the world just wanting to vent a little bit and be like, this is bad. And like, I don't even, which again, I hear you on if that breeds toxicity or breeds inaction, like that isn't great. But I don't know. My first thought is like, maybe you should take it easy on the world for a second, because it is really hard and maybe it just needs its feelings to be heard. But that isn't to say that that is only like, if you can't move from that stage of feeling sorry for yourself eventually into something more productive, I understand. That is more of a concern. It was the first thing where I was like, maybe we just like need a venting moment. We just need an outlet first before we can get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's interesting because, nihilism is not a new idea. I think it has been around for a while, and even there have been like interesting journeys that individual thinkers have had. I know Camus, as one example, sort of started his literary and sort of maybe public intellectual career as a nihilist, and at some point sort of changed and transitioned out of that and sort of saw the pain points or the issues that nihilism sort of creates. And, I'm sure others have done that as well. There's sort of like, I think, an orientation in youth to turn towards nihilism for, probably because in the way that society is structured at this point, when you are sort of entering into early adulthood at, 17, 18, 22 years old, whatever it is, people are sort of like low on their ability to wield any sort of feeling of power, right? Mm-hmm. You're sort of contending with the decisions of previous generations, and not enabled to do much about it because you're so early, right? Whether it's through work or whatever, your sort of entry level jobs or sort of learning, the structures that exist in order to sort of prevent change, whatever it is. But there is sort of some kind of uptick, right? Like the subreddit r/nihilism. I'm reading from a Huck article that we can share about the rise of why more young people are turning to nihilism is the title of the article.
Mm-hmm.
But they said the subreddit r/nihilism grew from 31,000 members pre-pandemic in January 2019 to 115,000 members in April 2022, which, is like edging in on quadrupling the number of members in a 3-year time frame, right? So there are sort of social construct or societal conditions, I guess, right? The pandemic, climate change, other things that we can point to that are sort of creating a frustration of like, why won't this thing change? But the scale of change on social issues is slower than the sort of perceived time that we all live in as like human beings. Like those things are in conflict, and I don't know, like this idea of pessimism and optimism often, I think, shift when you adjust time horizons, right?
Exactly. Well, this is the thing. It reminded me of that recent article that came out from the Times. Is the world really falling apart, or does it just feel that way? And part of the challenge is change is so slow that if you don't see it happening, it can be really frustrating, and it can even skew your sense of where you are because it's hard to observe such change that is slow. And when you think about an individual and their own like what options they have ahead of them, there's like the do nothing path, there's the do something myself path, and the do something with help path. And the do something with help path is probably the best in the long term, like affect systemic change, like affect gradual change. But the do something myself path is probably something that is like you can shout from rooftops and you can be as loud as you can be, but the scale of what you can affect is going to be so much smaller. And I think focusing so much on that, or even the do nothing paths, are the things that can get into that spiral when making gradual change that is at the scale that you might want is like depressingly slow. And it's the big dinosaur problem, right? It's lumbering.
Yeah.
It is. It's hard.
Yeah. And it's sort of like beholden to like human failings to sort of think at scales that exist bigger than us. Like it's interesting when you think about like potential threats that are really low and the amount of actions and behaviors that we will take against them,
like sharks,
versus
people being really scared of
like
shark attacks.
Shark attacks. I looked up while we were talking, as you were sort of speaking that through, like kidnapping as an example that is like a thing that parents will go to extreme lengths to protect against, and sort of socially we've become increasingly afraid of. But the statistics in the United States is like between 2010 and 2017, fewer than 350 children under age 21 were abducted per year, right? Like that's like real close to 1 in a million chance per capita in the United States. I guess the number of children is lower, but it is like a very, like potentially you're more likely to be struck by lightning. I don't remember what the exact statistics for that are.
Yeah.
But the amount of things that we do to prevent that threat versus the amount of things that we do to prevent climate change or things like that are sort of like our ability to assess things to be pessimistic or optimistic seem like bad. And so pessimism and optimism almost seem like genetically oriented. Like that's sort of like how it feels to me, that it or is like a product of like a personality trait. And so like the question becomes like, what are you willing to do even if you are pessimistic? Is orientation towards action equally like personality or genetically driven, or is it something else? And is it like not useful from a media and social perspective to have conversations about pessimism versus optimism? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. The genetic part of it, I don't know. That seems like highly unlikely to me. I have to say, it seems like so much more likely to be like cultural and societal, and also just like mental well-being and things like that. But anyway, I think if nothing else, we have started to turn some gears.
Distinct genetic influences on optimism and pessimism were found, according to a journal article in NCBI, NLM, NIH.gov.
Okay, well, you can't just look at it and make such claims if you haven't even looked closely, Joey. What if you don't even know what it says? No, you're trying to read it. It's a twin study. You're like, I'm trying to read it.
Testing if optimism and pessimism are distinct systems within genetics. And it says that they're finding that a general positive genetic factor exerted significant links among both personality and life orientation traits, which is optimism and pessimism. Both optimism bias and pessimism also show genetic variants distinct from all effects of personality and from each other within this twin study.
All right, well then...
Interesting.
Okay, well then now you have it. Now we don't even need to conjecture. You just crack the code.
So great. So maybe it comes back to nihilism. There's nothing we can do about it.
There's nothing we can do. It's already done. You already found the study, so why are we even talking about it?
If you're a pessimist, you're a pessimist. But if you are a pessimist, the glass half full view on that is maybe just orient towards action. Do one thing.
Or other things. Or more than that.
Yeah, but, don't let it
or not.
Rule
or
your
do
life.
Nothing. Or whatever.
Yeah, or...
Doesn't even matter. Or...
Nothing matters. Everything is meaningless. And sit in your bubble of sorrow? I don't
even know.
Nihilism isn't inherently
I don't think it's
sorrowful,
nihilism isn't even pessimism. There's like a whole thing. We just don't have time for it. So we'll have to save it for another day.
Great. Kick me off. Can you do a recap?
Nope. What's even the point?
Well, that's it. Great. We did it. Nothing matters. Or everything matters.
Okay. Critical nonsense.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by... I just did the whole thing, Joey. Why do we have to do it again?
As always, we'd like to thank our executive producer and Ubermensch, Jess Vander. That's a Nietzsche reference.
No idea. Okay. We'd like to thank sound engineer and a reason to be optimistic, Alex Montel.
We'd like to thank programming coordinator and the grumpiest optimist that I love very deeply, Les Jacobs.
And to thank... Why is this so hard? Thanks to our production crew and source of slow and normal pace change, Sarah Gilbert and Norma Estridge. I'll see myself out.
As always, thanks, Ellen. Special thanks to Giving Up.
Yeah, I have to go. Bye.
Special thanks to gratitude. Bye. Love you, mean it. Bye.
Critical nonsense. I'm brought to you by a tiny squid that lives in the recorder. We would like to thank nobody. Because why would we do that? And special thanks to nobody.